It looks at objects and the importance of objects as repositories of our world, as repositories of who we are and what we think.
So having these two wonderful institutions in our town, Ohio State and the Columbus Museum of Art, working together to show these archives, these objects, in new ways, is a huge gift to our community.
Well, we've gone through 35 collections at Ohio State.
Probably the oldest thing you'll ever touch. Here, take a grab.
I have to touch it then.
Here, grab it.
And we've come up with almost 700 objects, which sounds like a lot, except we realized that in these 35 collections, we are actually pulling from 133 million objects.
And when I talk about vast, I am talking about over 133 million objects.
People come from all over to study from our collections. There's no substitute to having the actual thing you're supposed to learn about right in front of you. With the professor and a good microscope and all the books in the world, that's the best way to learn it.
They are significant as primary source objects and as holders of our history. You can imagine that people 100 years from now are going to be coming to our archives, ask questions that we haven't even thought of yet. And these objects are still going to be there, and they're going to be holding new answers.
So the works come in, and we check the condition of them to make sure that nothing's happened to them physically, and that they're still in the same shape as they were when they left their museum.
It really was incredible. I mean, this was possible, not only the dedication of the museum curators, I mean, Melissa Wolf led a great team, but also all of the curators and the collection managers and the archivists and the librarians at the university who gave so willingly of their time. I mean, that's really what made it, because you have to work with the people who know those collections. They've got to help you understand, and they were so generous with, oh, how about this, how about this? You know, we thought about that.
And that's one tooth of a mastodon, a large prehistoric elephant that lived here in Ohio during the Ice Age. And this is the one I've been digging up for the past 4 summers. We've got about half the skeleton so far.
We got plenty of jars of snakes. Sometimes big jars, sometimes little ones.
And we drew on this idea of the curiosity cabinet, which came out in the 18th century, and it can be very sort of highbrow, but on the other hand, it can be kind of fun. And we drew on the ideas of objects that can create wonder and curiosity, and they sort of, we fixate on them and they fascinate us.
This idea of collecting things, you know, in isolation, art being collected over here, science is collected over here, natural history is collected over here, current culture over here, that's a relatively new idea. You know, in the Renaissance, the early collectors, this idea of the cabinet of curiosities or the Wunderkammer, this idea of bringing all these incredibly fascinating, kind of awe-inspiring objects, collecting them simultaneously and seeing how the way they intersect tells us more about our world.
Putting all of these different things together, putting things that are scientific discoveries next to art objects, let's say, it starts to, you know, spark your imagination, and it sparks different ideas about beauty and aesthetics. So it's that flexible thinking, that creative thinking that both scientists and artists do. You know, that cross-fertilization is a way to further discoveries.
And so there are shells and machines and artwork and fish and birds and hats and shoes and cricket cages.
I mean, for me, I went and there were the pickled fish. I mean, the clownfish and the common reef fish, you know, all these different fish who, in my younger years, I was in the dance department. And we shared a building with zoology. So every time you'd go into the studio, there were the pickled fish and the snakes. And so, not to be intimidated, we started to name them. And so to come back to the museum and see Tom, Dick, and Harry, and you know, Harold and Maude, and you know, the whole crew was incredibly exciting.
So there are these wonderful sort of gear machines, and I kept thinking of Duchamp and found sculpture when I saw them, but they were beautiful, and it gives you a whole new appreciation for the idea of a beautiful machine, something that's very efficient and does what it's meant to do well.
Kinematics is technically the study of motion, but it's used in mechanical engineering. More general than that, it's typically people think of mechanism kind of things. This is a 6-bar linkage, which is a cedar chest hinge. And this is quite common. The idea being that you want the lid to close, and then when it opens, you want it to be able to still shove the chest against the wall without having the lid hit the wall. The particular models that we have are, some of them are more than 100 years old.
I love the Marilyn Monroe photographs. I mean, a whole group of Marilyn Monroe photographs that no one's ever seen. The eyeglass thing is really great. I mean, who can't be inspired by seeing, you know, I'm sorry, Woody Hayes' Projector pretty much blew me away. I mean, he was like one of the first to ever use films in teaching football. I didn't know that.
Believe me, he spent long hours with that projector. That projector went through a lot. That projector was tossed across the meeting room. That projector went through a lot of hard times with Coach Hayes, with him shutting it on, turning it off, and all that he would do when we would watch film. That projector probably went all night long after Coach Hayes had fallen asleep, because there's numerous occasions where people have found that he had fallen asleep while the projector was just rolling and rolling and rolling.
I love projectors. I love the sound of them and all the sprockets and the gears and the turning. And so to me, it's this really great machine, right, that has all the bells and whistles. To most people, it's Woody Hayes. It is this icon of Woody Hayes, right? So there's two totally different languages that object can speak.
The Historic Costume and Textiles collection here at Ohio State got started pretty much in the late 1920s. We have accession numbers that go back that far. We have about over 11,500 items in the collection. A lot of these, I mean, these are all ostrich that are in here, the white and the black, and you can see that they have all of these little fuzzy pieces on them. And part of what's really interesting about this dress is you can still see the original parachute seams in the train of the dress itself.
My name is Edwin Morgan.
My name's Betty Morgan. This is our wedding picture, and this is my wedding gown. And right after the war, everything was rationed and things were so expensive. And my mother-in-law said, why don't you have your wedding gown made out of the parachute that Edwin brought home? And we only had to pay $18 for it.